Thanks for joining us on Shannons Club TV, where we reflect on memorable cars from Australian roads and racetracks.
In each episode, we profile our feature car with rare images, great stories, and an owner's well-preserved example. We'll also get the latest market news from the Shannons auctions team.
So let's kick things off with the notorious British car that offered a unique blend of V8 power and luxury in a sleek 5-door hatchback, the Rover 3500 SD1.
Perhaps no mass production car since World War II fell as short of its potential as the Rover 3500 SD1. The 3500, of course, refers to the 3.5 litre V8 engine, while SD1 means Specialist Division 1. It was introduced in Britain in 1976 and arrived here in time for Christmas 1978. No one's Christmases came all at once, with this prime example of Leyland's unfulfilled potential. What was already a poorly built and unreliable car on its home market was an even worse one in Australia, where the stringent ADR 27A legislation meant peak power of just 102 kilowatts instead of the home market's 116. But the car had wonderful steering and handled sweetly. Had the Leyland corporate world had anything of its act together, the SD1 is the car that could have become the Leyland P76. Instead, all the P76 got was the 4.4 litre V8 intended for the aborted Rover P8. Sure, it might not have been ready for a mid-1973 release, but a locally manufactured Rover SD1 would almost certainly have been more popular with Australian buyers than the P76. Mark, Group C racing Rovers would certainly have added more variety to Bathurst in the mid-1970s, wouldn't they?
Yeah, they sure would under that fantastic Group C era. But I think in terms of relative performance, with a 3.5 litre engine, it probably would have been about as quick as the 3.5 litre JPS BMW 635 CSI, which you might remember was just struggling to have enough power to take on the bigger capacity V8.
Especially at Bathurst, starting with a full tank of fuel, having to go up that mountain the first few laps.
Exactly. Yeah. However, when we talk a bit later about the Group A era of the mid-80s, if there'd been a full-on Rover works attack with those 3500 SD1s, would have been a very different story, which I'll get to a bit later on.
By the late 1970s, 5-seater hatchbacks were extremely popular. Prospective buyers would gladly have sacrificed the ability to carry a 44-gallon drum in an otherwise conventional boot for the versatility of a folding rear seat. The SD1 had the right-sized interior without exterior bulk. I would rate this as the most beautiful 5-door hatchback in history. The timing of the SD1's local arrival could hardly have been worse. The Commodore SLE, launched 2 months earlier, was little more than half the price and equally luxurious. Perhaps the build quality of the Rover was not all that much worse than a Commodore, but at $20,000 of 1978 money, buyers were less forgiving. In 1982, the Series 2 with new dashboard, bumpers and headlights was introduced, but failed to achieve a higher level of quality. In 1984, the plush Vanden Plas variant with beautiful wooden leather joined the range. But Mark, Australian showrooms missed out on the high-performance Vitesse variant, which was the spearhead of Rover's quite successful racing program.
Yeah, it sure was. And that was all thanks to a burly Scotsman by the name of Tom Walkinshaw. Australian touring car racing went global in 1985. When governing body CAMS switched from homegrown rules to international Group A. On paper, the Rover SD1 had the ingredients for success, with low drag aerodynamics, sound suspension design and a sporting power to weight ratio thanks largely to its aluminium 3.5 litre V8 engine. In the early 80s, Tom Walkinshaw Racing led a factory attack on the British Touring Car Championship and the SD1's results were emphatic. TWR swept the floor in 1983, winning all 11 rounds outright with a Group A homologation special called the Vitesse, which had more grip and power with a big boot spoiler and fuel injection. A drawn-out legal stoush with arch-rival BMW robbed TWR of its title, but another series win in 1984 confirmed the SD1's winning credentials, And the V8 Rover's local stocks were boosted when 2 TWR Vitesses were entered for the 1984 Bathurst 1000. John, like so many British cars, the SD1 featured some wonderful design ideas that always seem to get trashed in the transition from the drawing office to the production line.
It's the proverbial slip between the cup and the lip. The car really should have been a fantastic car.
It had so many great ideas.
It was almost sabotaged from within by the whole, I suppose you could say, the culture of British Leyland.
British Leyland, yeah. And it really was political poison in that organisation at the time. You had, Triumph, Jaguar, Rover, BMC, all these different divisions, all competing at
the same piece of road.
Exactly, fighting over the same piece of turf.
Yeah.
And so many good cars suffered under that regime.
And perhaps none more than the Rover 3500 SD1.
Exactly. The 1984 Bathurst 1000 was the last to host Australia's unique homegrown Group C touring cars. But race organisers added a preview class for the new Group A cars to allow local teams and spectators to get a glimpse of the future. The TWR Rovers were clearly in a class of their own, qualifying more than 5 seconds faster than their rivals. Although one was hampered by a faulty diff in the race, the other Vitesse powered home to a dominant class win, some 4 laps clear of a JPS BMW 635 CSI with similar power and weight. The Vitesse went even faster in 1986 with twin throttle body fuel injection. Despite its Bathurst blitz, Aussie racers didn't flock to the UK to buy TWR Group A Rovers because the most affordable, practical and convenient choice continued to be Holden's V8 Commodore. Even so, one can't help but think how effective a team of TWR Rover Vitesses could have been in Aussie Group A. You can read many other great road and race stories on the Shannons Club website.
My name's Simon and this is my 1984 Rover Vitesse. The key specs of this car is it's an all aluminium 3.5 litre V8. It's got Lucas fuel injection, about 190 brake horsepower from the factory. I dare say a little bit that's been lost over the years. It's a convenient hatchback and it fits a family of 5 in comfort. Modern features for the age were a trip computer, and that tells you fuel economy, average speeds, time, etc, etc. One of the cleverest parts of the actual engineering of the car was the potential for conversion for left-hand drive for the European and American markets, where they've niftily hidden the hole for the steering column on the left-hand side by an air vent, and the dashboard pod would shift across and cover what is now the fuse box, and they just remove that and swap it to the other side. So very easy to convert. I was influenced into buying a Rover from my father. I spent a holiday in the back of one around Europe when I was a youngster, and ever since then the memory stuck with me, and I've owned 3 of these in the past. The previous 2 were automatics, and this one being the manual, that's what I always wanted. This Rover I find to be incredibly practical. I've looked around for other more modern cars to suit my needs, but I just can't find anything. It's got a massive boot, it's comfortable to drive, handles well, and it sounds gorgeous. My favourite feature on this car is probably the noise it makes. It does really nicely with the 5-speed gearbox, but also I love the shape. It's very 80s, very kitsch, but very cool. Almost 98% of Australian delivered cars would have been automatics, and it really sucks the horsepower out of the engine, so the 5-speed just lets it breathe a bit harder and go a bit better. My plans for the future with this is to hang on to it. I enjoy it. I'd like to one day take it off the road and give it a birthday. I've got lots of new old stock parts that I've been squirreling away in the back of the shed, which when the time comes we'll put it back together and give her another 30 years.
Chris Borobon from Shannons Auctions joins us for the latest on the Rover 3500 SD1. Welcome, Chris.
Hi John, how are you?
Welcome to the show, mate.
Hey Mark.
I know from previous discussions these things never turn up at Shannons Auctions, so can we look into that saying it's Rover enthusiasts only and die-hard Rover enthusiasts that own these cars?
Yeah, look, I think that's what it is. It is a Rover die-hard enthusiast. I mean, I haven't seen too many on the road either in recent times. I mean, we do see a handful come through for insurance over the years, and that's probably as far as it goes. They've come in for revaluations. But yeah, in general, we tend not to see too many at all. So I think it is really a die-hard sort of Rover market.
I wonder whether there's a couple of different things here about the Rover SD1. First of all, it was quite different from previous Rovers, but also the other thing is really, if you think about it, which I just have, no post-war Rover has an enormous market value. If the Rover SD1 had been a Jaguar or something, it might have worn a bit better, but there just doesn't seem to be the body of loyal enthusiasts, enough of them who really want such a car. Do you think that's right?
Look, probably there isn't, I think here, especially in Australia, a large volume. I mean, we're still seeing the cars fairly active on the racetracks in Europe.
Yes.
You know, and that's quite interesting because there's quite a following there in Europe for the SD1s.
Yes, and
Yeah, I mean, I guess if someone wanted to buy one locally, going through the clubs is probably a good idea because its build quality was an issue. There's no denying that. But if you're buying a car that a guy has lovingly owned, all the rectification work should have already been done. So getting one that's been owned lovingly for a number of years is probably the way to go.
Look, it is, yeah, and I think that probably the car club is the best place to go.
Yeah.
And get some advice, get on the cars. They had a great engine, the 3500. V8 was a great engine, great alloy engine, and probably one of the better engine notes out there. So there are probably some pluses about the car.
the whole car's a great design, just I'm afraid to say appallingly executed by British Leyland, but it could have been one of the best cars in the world in theory, but it didn't work out that way, and I guess that's why we're not seeing them getting big prices.
Yes.
So what if someone wanted to buy one? I mean, what's the spare parts backup and things like in Australia? With the end of British Leyland and all the things that have gone on, is there much parts and service for these cars?
I think mechanically there is enough 3500 engines out there, so because we saw that get carried across from a few different models, so I don't think that would be too much of an issue. From a panel perspective, that's probably where it's harder to answer, I think.
Yes, I think a few of them would have had P76 4.4 litre V8 transplants. The panels are another issue altogether.
Yes, yeah, that's right.
Thanks very much, Chris. And remember, you can get all the latest auction results on the Shannons Club website.
If you'd like your own race image of the Rover 3500 SD1, visit AutoPic's incredible motorsport photo archive. John, looking back at the SD1, what a car, what a massive amount of unfulfilled potential.
Lightweight, high-powered V8 engine, fuel efficient, 5-door hatchback, 5-speed manual gearbox, all that space inside, similar dimensions really to a Falcon. It really could have been just about the perfect car for Australia, and it would have been better built had it been built in Australia.
I mean, it beggars belief that this car and the Leyland P76 were both being developed at the same time.
Totally separate
when
cars.
one car...
Yeah, one car would have done both jobs.
Yeah, and you look at the European manufacturers, the Japanese manufacturers with their one car, their world car philosophy, even back then.
Yes.
If you could have put this in the hands of the Japanese and allowed them to build it, just imagine what a sensation it would have been.
And several years ahead of the Holden Commodore too.
Absolutely, yeah, we're talking the mid-70s.
That's
it was
right.
really ahead of its time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a great waste.
Yeah.
Yeah, sad story. We hope you've enjoyed reflecting on the Rover 3500 SD1. We look forward to your company next time on Shannons Club TV. Bye for
See you
now.
later.